The first thing I'll demonstrate is adding a question just directly in this space by creating it from scratch. And so now that I'm in a folder, I click on the New button, and we'll see all of the different question types that are listed here. So something that I'll mention about these question types, all of them can be automatically graded except for written response. The written response style of question is very open-ended, so there's no ability to teach the system what a correct answer might look like or what it might contain. Now, if you're creating a quiz online for the first time, I do recommend that you focus on just a few of these question types. In particular, these are the question types that are the most straightforward to set up. They're the most reliable in terms of automatic grading. And I think it helps to focus on these as you're getting started. So in particular, I would recommend thinking about creating true or false style questions, multiple choice style questions, multiple select questions. And as I mentioned, written response questions, although they're not automatically graded, sometimes you'll need to use those because you need the student to write something in their own words. Other styles of questions like short answer and fill in the blank are more challenging because the system requires that you input possible correct answers. But you can imagine that students may answer in a way that shows they understand the correct answer, but maybe there's a spelling mistake. Maybe they've capitalized things differently than you. So there are some things that you have to do within those question types that require a bit of extra setup to try to catch all of the variations in responses that you might expect. So those ones are more challenging, and like I said, if you're focusing on getting a quiz online for the first time, I prefer to focus on true or false, multiple select, multiple choice. So let's create a true or false question. You'll see that there's not a lot in terms of interface. Really, we give it the question text itself. And then we teach the system what the correct response is, in this case, by simply checking the answer. The student experience will involve seeing the question, obviously being able to input an answer, but of course it isn't going to reveal what the correct answer is. For every question type, you can also change the number of points. Basically, that is effectively changing the weighting of this question relative to others on the test. For most true or false, multiple choice, multi-select, it's probably just worth 1. Certainly for written response, you can imagine that might be worth more, 5 points or 10 points. There are some other options here, such as feedback, hint, adding a description. Most of those aren't used commonly, I would say, because with security concerns, it's not likely that you're going to be making the answers available online for students because it becomes so easy for them to copy and share. And the only way that they would ever see this feedback, for instance, would be if you made the questions and answers available online. So for the first time you're creating a quiz online, I would suggest not worrying about those things. When I click Save, we'll see that this question has been created within that question library section that I set up earlier. This was in week 10. And it does show me here the type, true or false, and the number of points that I selected. If I ever needed to go back and make a change to that question, I can edit it. And if I need to preview it, I can again see the student experience at the top, along with how it would look after it was graded. We can create a multiple choice style question in a very similar process. With true or false, we didn't really have to think much about randomization or shuffling. However, with multiple choice, we do have an option. So 4 possible answers or more. In fact, if you needed to have just 2 or 3, I could also remove the existing ones. So there's not a limit to the number of possible answers that are listed here. And you have the ability to randomize them. So that would mean for any given student, they wouldn't see these options in this order. They would see it in a shuffled random order. The one big consideration here is whether or not you have a style of question that involves all of the above, or possibly having an answer that would be, A and C, that sort of thing. If you have an all of the above, you want to be careful not to randomize, because that all of the above option may randomly appear at the top. So I'll create a question here that I expect to be truly shuffled. We'll save this one. And I'll create another multiple choice style of question that perhaps involves all of the above. In this case, I wouldn't want to randomize, especially because that's the correct answer. We'll take a look at multi-select style of questions as well. It looks very similar to multiple choice. The main difference being that multiple options can be correct. So the interface is a little bit different for this one. We still have the ability for points and for difficulty. Difficulty doesn't translate to anything related to score. It's more just a metric for your own quiz setup in terms of potentially pulling certain questions that are more difficult from a pool. So in this case, we have the ability to create as many possible options. Again, you're not limited to the 4 that are added by default here. I'll add a 5th option. And in this case, because multiple answers can be considered correct, you will check a box next to the correct rows. Depending on the number of points that you do want to assign for a question like this, if this was only worth 1 point, then I would recommend the grading option that you select is all or nothing. If you instead wanted to have, let's say, 5 points to a question like this, then you would look at correct answers. It's going to look at every one of the 5 possible options and determine whether the student correctly checked it or correctly left it unchecked. In this case, it's a simple enough question. I'll leave it to 1 point, all or nothing. They have to get exactly the 3 correct, or else they get 0 out of 1. But because it's only out of 1, it's not as punishing. Finally here, we'll look at creating a written response style of question. This one is the very open-ended style of question. And as I mentioned, we have the ability to control the size of the space where students type. Although for any of these selections, there's not an actual character or word limit. It just gives the student a sense for about how much they should write based on the size of this box. In this case, I expect them to spend more time and put more thought into this than a single multiple choice question, and so we will increase the relative weight by giving it a higher default points value. And let's say I wanted something about in the middle for length, about a paragraph in length. I would leave this here. You'll notice that there is a built-in spell check. This is something that the students will be able to leverage as they compose their answer. But again, there's no automatic grading to this anyways. A common use case I've seen as well for written response style of question would be to potentially have some preloaded text And let's say that this question was instead maybe asking for 3 sentences, different responses to different things. That also could have been done as 3 different questions. You can pre-populate this space to keep it somewhat organized. And then as a student's writing, you've sort of populated that space just to indicate where you wanted them to respond to various elements.